Hello everyone and welcome to our February Training Tuesday for OU Campus. Today's topic is social media tags in OU Campus. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode as the session is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. We'll attempt to answer your questions during the presentation. After the formal presentation has ended, we'll review and answer any remaining questions. Your presenter today is Rob Kippy, Senior Technical Support Engineer. Rob, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Good day. Thanks for joining. So today we wanted to cover a topic that we had partially covered before. We wanted to go in a little bit more depth just because as social media evolves and websites change, we want to make sure that everybody is able to stay up on top of it. So today we're going to talk about how to optimize your web pages to display as nice as possible for when people share and link to articles and web pages on your site. So today, let's jump into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And make sure everybody can see it okay. We're going to go ahead and have to swap these two. Okay, so moving into our presentation, let's see what's going on. So what's the problem? Why are we having this conversation today? We want to, eliminate the issue of your web page looking a little bit funny when people share it. So let's see what could possibly go wrong here. So first of all, I've created a new test page, for example, a blog article saying, hey, we got the conference coming up, come check it out. You should start preparing for it. And I want to then post this on social media. So here's my page, and I'm going to share it on Facebook. That looks kind of weird. Basically, it grabbed my logo image and used the full-size version of it, and it's all kind of lost in there. And if I take a look at my Twitter post, well, sure, that kind of works okay, but it's not the best. What could we do to improve this? So obviously, we're here to talk about social meta tags. So let's try that again, this time with the magic. So here's my updated Facebook post. Now you can see I have my primary image it's nicely summarized underneath. And so it just is a much better presentation of what I want now. Of course, I could have picked a better image, had better description, and that's why you guys are the experts on that. So, and here's my Twitter post. So that looks a lot better than just the simple link that could be to any website. This now has like a splash of information, and it just looks a lot better, and we'll get ideally more people clicking on it. So let's go and talk about how we get that to work. So you might be familiar with, if you're familiar with web pages and HTML code, you might be familiar with normal metadata. And this is content that lives in the top of your HTML document in the head region. And it tells information about your page usually to the computer of some sort, whether it's a system that's scanning it like Google for search indexing, or whether it's your browser just to display basic information like what to display in the tab at the top of your screen and stuff like that. So there's lots of important information that can go in there, and it's really meant for things that aren't necessarily visible. So you might, for example, know that you have a title tag that tells you the title of your page, and potentially it has some branding on it, and then also your description. And then you might even have keywords, although I don't know if Google really tracks those anymore, but if you have a local search engine and stuff like that, you can make use of those. But point is that this is content that is kind of stored up in the head and visible. And so the social media companies were like, well, let's make use of this. And so they created their own set. And so we call them social meta tags. And they're basically just specific meta tags that are used and scanned by those particular companies. And Facebook, I think, was one of the ones that kind of initialized it. And they have kind of labeled it as called open graph tags. And they wanted it to be open so that everybody else could, so that there wasn't a bunch of competing options out there and everybody could kind of synchronize on this. And then there's Twitter, and Twitter has more, and they'll make use of the open graph. But as we'll talk about in just a minute, but they also have some extra functionality that you can throw in, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the Open Graph is, as mentioned, considered to be the most universal standard, and a lot of other platforms will use it. So generally, we want to primarily focus on these, and then you can always add more later once you test particular social media platforms and see if you need anything more custom for those other ones. But for now, for today, just for the sake of time, we're going to cover just how to set this up in the first place. So we'll just do the bare minimums. So some of the examples of Open Graph tags, this is what it might look like, is you have your meta tag and you have your property. And inside that property tag, you're going to have OG colon, and then that's going to be the name of your tag. And then you have your content attribute, and that's where you'll actually have the information that will be stored for that particular value. And the thing to note with this particular tag with the Open Graph is that it uses the property attribute, and typically most metadata you're going to see the name attribute, and this is going to come into play a little bit later, and it will kind of explain how we do a few things here and there. So just keep that in mind. So here's some examples of some meta tags for OG, for Open Graph that we can use. The title of your page, basically, the type, so what is your web page representing, the image, so that you can make a nice image like I did to help kind of bring your user into your web page. And then of course, just the URL needs to match what your actual page is. And then if you wanted to, let's say, have a friendlier site name, I should have probably added mine so that it said Galena University, etc., instead of my test domain that I had, but that's okay. So if you want to see more information about other tags, how to set them up and do those things, you can really pretty much just Google search it, but here's the direct link to get right to it. And there's a lot more cool stuff there, and we can go into that a little later if you like. But let's move on. So the next step is, of course, let's take a look at Twitter. So these are very, very much specific to Twitter, and they, because they have a lot of cool different ways that you can style these links to your website, and they call them cards, and there's a bunch of different card types that you can set up, and they just display the information a little bit different, and that way you can kind of prioritize. If your particular web page is more focused on a movie, or a video, I should say, then you can have a different card that's, highlights and plays a little video player and stuff like that. So lots of cool stuff that you can do with these cards. And as I mentioned before, if for some reason you aren't, putting in all the specific Twitter information, then it will try to use the information from the Open Graph tags. And so generally, we find that you can put in the Open Graph stuff that you want, and then whatever extra that you need for Twitter, then you can throw those in extra. So here's an example of what the Twitter one looks like. And remember, coming back to that topic, this time the meta tag uses the name attribute. You can see that it prefaces its value here with Twitter : instead of the OG. So it's just another thing to keep in mind. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. You've got your name of your tag that will follow that, and then you have your content attribute where you'll actually have your information stored. So what are some examples? I mentioned the Twitter card already. So this is a number of preset options that you can choose from. I can't just put anything in here. You have to choose the ones that Twitter offers. And then you have the site, of course, the creator, URL, description. And a lot of these are basically going to be very synonymous to the OG ones, which is why you can, you know, not use them um, as long as there's an equivalent from the OG tag. And of course, there's more documentation here. It looks like on my screen, it just cut off a little bit on my link. But if you just do a Google search, you'll find it. Twitter makes it pretty easy to find, even though that URL looks pretty long. Great, so how do I add them to my site, right? So there's a number of ways, and we previously showed a few, and we'll cover those again. But in a pinch, if you really absolutely need to just update a single page because it's just not working right, there is a quick and easy way that you can do that. You can add them right to your PCF, and you just have to make sure you know where to put them, and we'll show you in just a minute. And that's great, but you know, it's not exactly going to be the easiest way to edit. It's not necessarily the easiest way for your users to edit. And you know, it's going to be duplicate data, so you're going to have to fill it out, you know, several times, especially if it's the same information as like your normal title and description and stuff like that. So, you know, so what's a better approach than just doing that? Well, that's where we have our sample code that we've pre-made for you, and you can find it on our GitHub, omniupdate/example code social meta. And this is really easy, and we make it really nice. But the caveat there is just that it's really good for site-wide information, and it's not necessarily the best for page-specific information. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So how do we fix that problem? Well, that's what we wanted to try and focus on today, is the hybrid approach. So this is where we're going to want to have page parameters that we have on our web pages, and the XSL that we reused will have to just update slightly so that it will optionally use those parameters if their values are present. So we'll talk about that in just a bit. So going on to the first one. The first one is obviously the most simple, but it is going to require source code access to your PCF page. So let's talk about how we're going to do this. We're going to edit the PCF in the source edit. We're going to look for this little head code node that we throw on all of our pages from implementations starting from, you know, 5-6 years ago. I've been with the company 9, so I don't know, do the math, I guess. And what we're doing with that is that the PCF is literally supposed to just be content regions, the content of the page, and then the XSL actually builds the structure of your page. So we needed a place that you could put in content that's going to get pushed into that head region, which is normally built by the XSL. You might have a global include or something like that, but we do want this code to get processed. You know, in this case, this is page specific, so we want to be able to put it in a page specific spot so that it can go into that kind of global head region. And so we've created these nodes. You'll see a head code, a body code, and a foot code usually. And if you don't have those, you know, for whatever reason, there could be many, feel free to check in with our support team, and we can help you either set that up or you know, add it, etc., or figure out where it is. And so don't be shy about that. Feel free to check in with us. But basically, you're going to insert basically those meta tags directly into that head code node, and then the XSL should scoop that content up and dump it out into the right place in your page. And it just needs to go anywhere in your head region. There's not a concern about where it goes. And the reason that we use the head code node instead of the, let's say, the properties with a properties tag wrapped around it, which is kind of the other traditional spot that we put the meta tag information, is primarily because the OG tags require that property attribute, and at this point our system doesn't recognize that particular attribute, and so they won't show up there. And so just to prevent any case of like overwriting or anything like that, we just throw them in the head code node. So yeah, feel free to check in if you have any issues with that. So let's go ahead and let's demo that real quick. So I'm going to just escape out and go over to my page. I'll show you my little setup here. I've got my test page, example blog page right here. And I have just a couple of things going on with my screen so that you can just see what the heck's going on with all the information that I have. I've got in another tab, I've got my page published format. Woohoo. And then I've got, and this is a cool tool, and I do have a link to this in my slide deck, so you guys want to get this later, you can also just look it up. But basically, this is how I can double check to see how my page is going to look when I go to post it. And you can see this is the bad, the look that I didn't want from before. So basically all you do is you just put your URL in there and you hit debug, or you can scrape it again, and it will pull it up and try to give you the best look of what it's going to look like when you try to post it. And over on my last tab, I have the Twitter version of the same thing. And in this case, I don't have the tag property on the page at all, so it's not able to render any kind of card preview at the moment. And that's why when I first linked it, or at least in my slide deck, it showed you it was just a link and nothing else of a preview. So we'll use these to evaluate my work as we go through. But we're going to go back to my page, and I'm going to click on the source. And I might just go ahead and switch this to my favorite theme here, and maybe increase the font size a little bit for you guys. And you can see a typical PCF starts at the top with XML declaration, and we, link to the XSL that we want to process it. And we have our kind of root document node that begins the whole, stores all the content for the page. And at the very top of that, we have our head code node. And so this is where I want to enter these. And if set up properly, the XSL will just scoop up any content that lives in this and throw it in my head page, head node in my page. So I'm going to go ahead and grab from my snippets, and I will be sharing these afterwards. So feel free to take a look. But I'm just going to dump them in, and I can just quickly highlight all these, click Shift Tab, and it will format them for me to put them in line and all that. It's a really nice tool. And let's just take a look at what I've got right now. So first is the OG type, and I'm just saying this is a website. And then the URL just needs to basically match where my published page is. And in this case, we're using just an older orientation demo site, so it's not quite HTTPS yet. And the title, of course, is the title of my page. And then I have the description, and this kind of matches the meta tag that I had for the description. And it's just a little mini summary. And then here I have the OG image tag as a fix, and so that it won't use my logo, my site logo. So this is specific to my page now. So that's in place. And then that's all the OG stuff. There's obviously a lot more important information that you could put in there for OG tags. One being like, who which Facebook user maintains this and stuff like that. I think it's FB admin. And then lastly here we have just one for the Twitter, and that's to indicate which type of card I want to display in my Twitter posts. And in this case, I'm going to go with summary. And there are lots of other, as I mentioned, cool options, but we'll just go this one for now. So I just throw this in here, I'll hit save. And you can even, if you're more tech oriented, you can, there's a trick you can do to just see if it went through or not. You can do this, right click on your frame, make sure you're not on an image, and you click on this view frame source, and that'll open it up in a new tab, and you can see the HTML that's in the preview, and that's kind of as close as you're going to get to what you're going to get on the product production. And so you can see now that my meta tags have come through. So that's good. My XSL is set up correctly. So yeah, so if this isn't happening, that's when you want to check in with us at support, and we'll help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that, and we're going to go back to my page. We'll publish it. and we'll do the ultimate test by going and rescraping I have to get my session back here. So let's go ahead and just come back here and we'll just scrape again. And maybe one more time. Sometimes it caches it. There it goes. Sometimes it caches the image. Um, might have to hit it a couple times. And now you can see that it's now updated with my primary image and I have the information in there and it's all looking good. Let's go ahead and try it again for Twitter. So we'll click preview. And now we have our nice little summary. So this is what we wanted, and that's great. So I don't see any questions going so far, so let's continue. So that's the quick and dirty option. Let's go back to our presentation and switch these again. Oops, that was the wrong one. Pressed the wrong button, sorry. All right, so that was the first option. The second option now is how do we bring in our pre-made code? We want to, make this easier so that it goes across all of our web pages. We don't have to do this for every single page because that would be a nightmare for most of you. So it's not hard really. I mean, and that's one of the things I want to get across is don't feel intimidated to try and set this up for your site. It's just a few steps. So let's go through it because we're going to need it for our final more involved setup. So at least if you get this far, this can help out with just across your entire site. So the first is you're going to go to our example code. You can just go into GitHub, look up our Omni update, and then you'll find it in the example code. So if we go there, you're going to get a README on how to do it too. So it's all the directions are there. But here's my directions anyways. And you're going to basically just upload one XSL file. You're going to put it into your shared or your import folder. And then you're going to choose either like a particular XSL. So let's say you only want this to happen for your news pages or something like that. You could go directly to that XSL and update it so that all those pages get it. Otherwise, most likely you'll want to have it work on all your sites. On all your pages in your site. So you just go into your common XSL or whatever XSL builds the structure for the majority of your pages. You're going to basically just add the import statement to that new XSL file that you uploaded. So that's step one. And then step two, I guess first one would be uploading, but of the actual editing the code would be importing it. And then the second and last step is that you just need to find where the head region is being built in your XSL. And there's a couple things, and we'll take a look at this when we go into the code. But basically, you just need to find out where the head region is being built, and then you'll add in this call template to that particular template that lives in that XSL that you uploaded, and it's called social-meta. So we're just going to add that, and then that pretty much does the trick. Now, the way that particular XSL works is it's going to grab, the description and the title from the page's meta tags or parameters already. If you do have a custom setup where it's grabbing from parameters, you might need to do some tweaking. But most of the time, people have meta tags, just the normal title tag and then the meta description. And it's going to automatically pull those from the page. So it's not like it's, completely global settings across all your pages. It will pull page-specific information. But that's kind of the limitation that's the limit of what it will pull by default from individual pages. The image and the other information will be global, and the way that you set those up are with directory variables. So you can create a series of directory variables that you can distribute across your site so that, let's say, your accounting, not, man, words these days. Admissions, that's where for some reason I mix it up with. Your admission site perhaps wants to have its own kind of, feel. And so maybe it wants to have its own social media presence or something like that. And so maybe you need to customize some stuff for that. Or maybe your athletics site wants to have a different image, as a default image for their items, because, you want to represent the athletics team with your mascot, picture of your mascot or something like that. So anyway, so this is perfect so that you could distribute, default information across the majority of pages through your site. So this is really good setup. So let's go ahead and just demo um, how that works. But I do want to just mention a couple more caveats real quick. And as mentioned, the title, the description are going to be pulled from the meta tags. And 2, it's going to default to website. The type is going to default to website. And then lastly, the Twitter card defaults to summary. So, right now out of the box, it's not quite as flexible maybe as you want. You can always customize those things, and we'll take a look in just a minute. But it's not something that automatically will have all the customizations that you might want to have, especially on a per page basis. So that's why we have the third option. So yeah, so let's go ahead and just exit out real quick, and let's go over to our page and let's give it a try. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click out to my pages, and I'm actually going to do a cheater method. I'm going to right click and open a new tab and bring that tab, because I like to have my XSL on the left of my tabs. So I'm just going to go ahead and navigate now to where my XSL lives. So in this case, for me, in this particular Galena site, it's _resources XSL. And then I'm going to go to common XSL and just show you real quick, ultimately, where I want these things to go. I want it to go across all of my sites. So I'm going into common. My particular structure has it loosely in the XSL folder, which I think the majority of people do. And if we just take a quick look at the XSL, we'll see that we have the style sheet information at the top, how we're processing XSL, what namespaces we're using, blah, blah, blah. And then right after that, we have our import statements. And this is how we bring in more XSL files into kind of one big project. And so these are all our extra resources that we might have. And so this is ultimately where I want to bring in that new XSL. First, I got to upload it though, so let's do that. So I'm going to exit out real quick. I'm going to go into my shared, because I kind of want to have it in my common XSL resources. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to my folder where I've already downloaded it. Handy enough. Oh, I should show you. Here's, sorry, side tangent. Here's where you get it from GitHub. Looks like this, social meta, example code, social meta. And here's the README information with all the nice information. Here's detailed information about each of the tags that you might be interested into. So it's all really nice. And then here's the directions. So you can always get it from here. Again, we did a little bit of a presentation on this previously, so we'll just kind of skip through this a little bit more quickly. But basically all I did is I just clicked on the download and got a version of it, in which case I have it right here, Social Meta XSL. So I'm going to go ahead and just go back to my OU Campus instance, my shared folder, and I'm just going to just drag and drop it in. So it shows up here, and I can just take a look inside and see what's going on. So just as a quick overview, we have our style sheet version. We've got our params. So what are these? These are essentially variables that we're creating. But the reason that we're calling them param instead of variables is that the system will be able to collect this information from OU Campus itself. So OU Campus will pass along certain values into the XSL engine, and typically you see a lot of these being set in your variables XSL, or OU variables XSL as we often call it. But since these are kind of custom for these. This makes it a nice little package that we can throw in one XSL. Um, and you can kind of define them anywhere, but generally if you want them to be used everywhere, then you want to, we usually put them in our global variables XSL basically. But in this case, we do need to preface them with OU because that references that they're coming in from our OU campus system. And but our system doesn't necessarily create these by default. These are actually going to be coming in. You create these via a directory variable. So you can actually, just as a side tangent on using directory variables, you can create any directory variable that you want in the system. And then all you need to do to use it in XSL is to create a param with the name OU prefacing whatever your directory variable is called. And we'll actually go through the directory variable creation process in just a second, so just bear with me. But basically, in XSL, we have to use this OU colon to get it, but the directory variable itself would just be the portion after that colon. So anyway, so we're basically setting up a bunch of directory variables that we want to use. And then we have this template social meta, right? And then that's where we're going to do a series of checks. So we're going to basically check to see if the directory variable for the OG image is not empty, then we'll go ahead and write that property OG image, and we just dump in that directory variable value. The rest of these are, well, not the rest of them, but some of them are going to come from the description, the title, and the metadata, for example. So this is expecting that you do have a particular PCF structure. So you might need to tweak the XPath just a little bit if you have a slightly different setup for your PCF pages. But ultimately, it's just going to grab the title information from your title node from your page. And then the URL is going to build it from one of our other system directory, excuse me, one of our system variables, OUHTTP root, and that's pulling in from your site settings where your site is currently pointing to. That way, if you're trying to set this up on a test domain and then eventually you want to use the same code on your live domain, you don't have to hard code your site path in there. It will pull it automatically from your site settings. So that's kind of a nice thing. So that's all that's doing is it's just taking the page path and then adding your HTTP root in front of it. Because this is a reminder, all of these tags, they need to be absolute URLs because when they get pulled into the social media platform, it needs to be able to reference back to your site as opposed to being a root relative link to their site. So yeah. So description, the site name, again, is just basically checking anytime there's a directory variable, it's just going to check to make sure that it's not empty first, and then if it's not, then we'll use it. So that way, you can still predefine these directory variables at the root and just have them be empty if you want. This will, still check to see if as long as it's not empty, then as long that it'll put a value in there. And then here you can see the Twitter information, and this is where the summary is hard-coded. So if you did want to choose a different card type by default, you could put that in there, or if you wanted to create a new directory variable, you could create a new one and then have this pull as a directory variable. And this could be the default value if there wasn't one set, for example. So that's basically all it is. There's a couple more things in here that you can kind of enable if you really want to customize further, but for now, this is kind of the basics. And that's all that this is doing. That's the end of our document. Let me close that. So you can see the end of the style sheet here. So we just want to make use of this. I'm going to go ahead and just save a version. You don't need to publish your XSL, so I'll just say just uploaded. So this is kind of the OG version, and we'll go ahead and then want to make use of this. So how do we make use of that? We're going to go back up to our XSL folder. We're going to go inside common XSL, and we're going to just copy in one of these import statements and change that to be social meta. Okay, so we save that. And I like to just do a save in place, go back to my page is why I like to have multiple tabs. And I like to just do a quick preview, make sure I didn't break anything. Keep in mind that if you're working on a live site too, you'll want to make sure that you're taking precautions not to interrupt other people's workflows if you do make mistakes. So, one option that you can do is copy your XSL folder, and then that way, and then set up your test page to point to your XSL copy folder. Um, and that's a common way that we like to do it in support. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, but for now, since I'm just showing you real quick, I'm going to do it the dangerous way. So we have that import statement in. We didn't get an error, so that means that it was able to find the file and bring it in. If you did break it, it might look at something like this. Could not be parsed. Looking for this file, couldn't find it, error reported, no such file, blah, blah, blah. So basically it couldn't find it. So there's lots of helpful information in your error messages if you're doing coding. So we're going to set that back. And now we just need to find where our head region is being built. And this can completely vary depending on your particular setup. So generally, I like to work backwards from the XSL that your PCF is declaring initially. So in this case, this would be post. I'd go to post, and then I'd see that post was importing common. Kind of doing this fast here. And so there I know that, common is going to be building most of this. So if you're more familiar with your XSL structure, you can go right into it. If you're not and you need help, feel free to check in with support. In this case, while I'm in common, we'll see that I'm building the basic page structure right here. And you can see that it's building the root HTML, and then here's my head tags right here. So I can actually just go ahead and do it right here. In some cases, you'll see like a common head code template or something like that, and that's a good place to put it as well. And in this case, there's this call template additional head code, or sometimes we'll call it template head code. And that's great if you wanted to customize it so that it was only being added for, let's say, the blog XSL or something like that. And then that way you would go into that template that's in that other XSL file, and you could, it would basically bring it into this spot as well. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put it right underneath this additional head code. And I'll just say social media, meta tags. And in this case, all I'm going to do is do an XSL call. And I just give it the same name that it uses. So it's just going to be social meta. And then I can just self-close it, because that's all we're doing is we're just calling it. It's just a kind of a pre-stored bit of information. And once that's in place, I can go back and just preview my page and make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to go back to this view source tab that I had, and let's just see. Oh, I do have my from the previous step. So just to prevent any confusion, let's go ahead and clear this stuff out. Sorry, almost forgot a step there. So let's go ahead and check out. I'll refresh that. And so now we can see that we've got our meta tags coming through. It's kind of wrapping a little bit funny on this screen. Let me zoom in just a little bit if that helps at all. So meta property OG title, OG URL, description, and website. And it looks like it might be that my description is empty, or it's just not pulling correctly. So that might be something that we'll want to take a look at real quick. So let me just see what's going on. I've got OUC properties and meta name description, and it might be because I've got this capitalized description. And so if I go back to, as a quick fix, I'm gonna go back to my XSL. This, so far, it's working correctly. It's bringing in the social meta tags from the social, or the template from the social meta XSL. So this common XSL is good. I'm gonna save a version and just say added social meta XSL, whatever. You guys can have a much more informed comment for your files. And I'll check that back in and go back over to my social meta XSL, and let's just work out why my particular description wasn't coming through. And yes, it looks like because it was doing a explicit description with the lowercase. So I'm just going to just go ahead and make that uppercase to match my particular files. You could, change this to be like a case insensitive, make it a lowercase and then check it, etc. Lots of stuff you can do with that. But for now, I'm just going to uppercase that letter D. And then let's just try this again. And now you can see that my description is coming through. So we are good in that sense. The rest of the stuff should come through fine, website, summary, etc. So yeah, so now I can publish this and, we have our stuff. We already know that we're good though. We tested that one previously. We don't have a lot of new information in there. What I do want is to demonstrate a global image. So before we go and validate this, let's do one more thing. We're going to go to our I'm going to do this at the site level just so you can see, but you can easily do it on a per folder basis by clicking the quick link here in your breadcrumb for a folder, and you can go right in and scroll down to the bottom and get to the directory variables. But here's the benefit of doing it at the site level as an admin, is that then it's going to be a lot easier to find for your other users that have the ability to add and manage directory variables. So I went to my site settings, I went to site access, and then down at the bottom you can see that here are some directory variables. I'm going to click add, create new variable. You kind of have to click on it twice and then you'll get a little editable region, or sometimes you can just start typing and it'll go. And I'm going to choose OG-image, and that matches my XSL. And then I'm going to put in a value, and I happen to remember where my image is. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in, and you guys can just see that it just needs to be an absolute URL, and then of course the path to your image from here. So this is just a little Galena crest, right, for our Galena website, because this is going to be across the site. So this is my most generic image that I can come up with that will still be the right size and dimensions. That should look okay. So let's give that a test. So we'll save that. Okay, and then I still have my tab here. So I can refresh this guy again, even though I even left that page in the tab a long time ago. And you can see now that my meta property OG image came through. And so that is now looking good. So if I just go ahead, go back to pages, back in my place, and I'm going to publish this. Oops, forgot to leave a comment because we're just going a little bit short here. And we're just going to go ahead and scrape again. And again, it might be a little cached, so we'll just give it a minute. There it goes. So now we have our, university logo on the side, and it's certainly better than the one that was kind of out of proportion and too large. So obviously you might want to pick a better image, but you get the idea. Okay, so let's go back to our slide deck. We've got a little bit more to go here. And of course I did this again. Okay, so the third option now is the hybrid. This is where we want to now take that XSL and slightly customize it now to use parameters for each page. So we need to be able to add the parameters to our PCF pages. Most likely, you're going to need to do a global find replace. So if you need help doing that, let us know, and we can help you with the regex to do that. But ultimately, just for our test purposes, we're just going to show you how you can dump it into a test page and get it working. So here's an example that I want, and I want the image because that's usually the one of the big things that you want to customize, for your individual pages. So here's a parameter, and we're going to basically throw this into our config section where we have our other parameter fields, and this is what it might look like. on your properties editing. And then we need to actually make use of that value by updating the XSL. So what we're going to do is we're going to update, rather than just checking the director variable, we also want to check the parameter node itself first. So that's basically, it's just another 2 steps on top of it. And that can get a little bit more complicated depending on the parameters that you use, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's go ahead and jump into that real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my, my post page. I'm going to click on source, and this is where I need to figure out where my parameter should go. And in most cases, the setup is going to be that you're going to have some kind of a properties tag to indicate where your parameters go. And you might have 2, and they might be in different orders. You might have one. We put this label on here just to kind of help indicate. Here's the metadata. Title, meta, and it looks like I was trying. I forgot to take this out, but yeah, that was a test there. But ultimately, and maybe I should take that out real quick. Sorry, leftovers from testing. Ultimately, I want this parameter to go in here with my other parameter fields. And there's something to keep in mind is that we have these sections that throw in like a field group almost. And so you want to make sure that it goes in a spot that it's not going to get like confused in with another group. Or in this case, if I were to throw it in at the top of my list, which is more ideal, the problem is that this first one doesn't have a section. So I'll just demonstrate how that looks incorrectly and then show you another way. So let me just take that parameter field and copy and paste it in. And I do have a link that's coming to our support site where we have examples of all the parameter codes that you can choose from. And then you can customize them from there if it helps. So if I just throw it into the top, which is kind of my more ideal spot for it, the only issue is that when I go to hit properties, you'll see that it says social media meta tags, and then you'll see that it's got this enable comments right underneath it. And so it kind of paired it in there, and I don't really want that to happen. So what I just need to do is I can either move this to the bottom, or I can add a section to this particular parameter here so that it has its own group. And for now, I'm just going to take the shortcut here and just say miscellaneous. And then that way, we can see social meta tags. And then I can keep adding more parameters underneath this one that will get grouped in here. But it won't affect, this will now be separated. So this looks good. I want to choose, my image on a more local basis. So while I'm here, I can go ahead and do that. I click on this guy. I'm going to go to my blog posts, images, and choose my cool cat picture. And of course, it's not going to do anything because, well, 1, it's going into a hidden region, and 2, we need to set the XSL to actually use that. So, but that's set up properly. We can go view the XSL source just so we can see what it's doing. And we can see right here that it just threw in our dependency tag directly in that parameter node. So that's great. With the only caveat is that we have to keep in mind that this is going to put in a root relative path, which is how most of the rest of our system work. So we're going to need to make sure that our XSL handles that okay. So if we come back to our social meta XSL, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to find my spot where I'm building the OG image. Okay, and I'm just going to make a little bit of space so that we can see what's going on. So this is the original, and then I'll eventually erase it. I don't always like to get rid of things that I'm replacing right away just so I can re-reference it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my code that I've done ahead of time. And I would have typed it out, but we're getting tight on time. So let's go ahead highlight that, Shift Tab, it'll put it in a nice formatting. And so this is the original, and then this is now my fix. So let's take a look at what this is doing. First, I'm creating a variable that I'm going to call this, and this is going to pull the OUC properties parameter with my particular name of OG image. So that should match my name attribute right here. Does that make sense? Um, and then we just do this little normalized space just to make sure that in case somebody pasted in a value, it didn't have like a white space or anything like that. So that just trims it basically. So we store that parameter. That just makes it a little bit easier to do this crazier logic later. Then we're going to do a choose statement. And the basics of this choose is it's like an if, it's a logical check in XSL. We do the first check to see if the parameter, that value, that variable that we just set, we just make sure that's not empty. And if you don't have that parameter, then that should be empty. This will return an empty value. So in that case, this should only return a result if you have that parameter and that parameter has a value. So it's safe in the sense that you don't have to apply it to every page. And then in that case, we're going to build this. I'm going to come back to that logic in just a second because I think it just helps to stay with the original logic here. So if this when condition is not true, so the parameter is either empty or the parameter doesn't exist, then we're going to fall back into this second when condition. So then we check against this condition here, and this now should mirror what was done in the original if statement. And so that's going to be basically the same. If the director variable is not empty, then we are going to use that as our meta tag. And since we don't need to do anything else, we don't need to have an otherwise. So basically we just do nothing if there's no image specified anymore. Now you could, put in an otherwise statement and have your kind of else. So this is in most languages, the way that you would see this would be like a if, and then this would be an else if. And then you could finally have your otherwise or else. But this is how XSL works. You'll see it like this. So for this condition to go through, this one has to be false. If these are both true, it will only do the first one, if that makes sense. So let's now go back to our logic for the parameter. So let's see what's going on with this code here. So obviously we're just writing our meta tag, but inside the content region, we're going to check for a few things. So we use the curly brackets to indicate that we're going to do an XPath expression. That's so we can get these variables and other things like that. And in this case, I'm doing an inline if inside XPath. So this is another logical thing that you can do in XPath. You could, there's the fun thing about programming is you can do this a bunch of different ways. This could have been outside with another whole choose when. But in this case, all I really want to do is just make sure that my value isn't, well, I want to make sure that my value isn't root relative before I want to make sure it is root relative before I go ahead and just slap on our website domain. So basically, I just check to see if it starts with a slash. So if the parameter value starts with a slash, which should indicate that it's a root relative path, then I'm going to throw in our HTTP root, which is the domain. And then I don't want to have the double slash because if it's root relative and it starts with a slash, the OUHTTP root value does also end with a slash. So all I do is I just I do a substring after, and I just grab this parameter value after the first slash. So substring after that slash. That's all that's doing. If you have the domain variable that kind of corrects that and removes the slash, then you could just use that without using the substring after, but that's, this will work more universally. And then the else statement, if we come back to that one, what that's doing is if it doesn't start with a slash, then we're going to assume that it's already absolute URL, and we're going to just throw it in as is. Now, this is a little bit more simplistic. You could have page relative paths, etc. But in this case, I'm going with the assumption that it's either going to be absolute or root relative. If you need to have other use cases, feel free to check in, and we can help you add more logic checks. But basically, that's all that that's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this guy because we don't need it anymore. And we're going to save this. And let's go ahead and now check to see what happened. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my tab that has the view source, and we can see my meta tag OG image, which is right here with the Galena crest. And if I refresh this, you can see that that now has been replaced with my Harry Potter, and it's got an absolute URL. So now we can publish this guy. And we can come back to our social media checks. And we'll just scrape a few times, make sure that we're getting the non-cached version. There it goes. So that one finally went through and we got the image that we want. And let's try it again here. And there we go with the Twitter. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can go in and customize that set of XSL. The XSL gives you a great starting ground for setting up your social meta tags across the majority of your site, but the parameters and a little bit extra code in there, you can add to also have page specific information that you also want to do. And the nice thing about the parameters is that you can lock them down you can lock them down by group so that if you don't want just anybody to be able to edit it, you can also have that be customized in that sense too. And the only last thing that I want to mention real quick while we're here on the parameters is that when we take a look at the, here I have, if I just click on the Twitter one. So you'll see that you have a different types of cards that you can choose from. And you have the summary card, the summary with large image, a player card, an app card, cards markup. So you have these kind of preset ones that you can choose from. That would be a more ideal case to maybe have like a drop down select, and then that way you can let the user pick from the set that you want. And in that case, the logic that you'll use in your XSL to pull from the selected option value, that's a little bit different. If you need help with that, we're always willing to help you on our support help desk. So that's the last part I wanted to add about that. Otherwise, let's just mention these last things and click the right button this time. Here's the links to those Facebook and Twitter validator checkpoints that you can do to validate your work. And then here's our link to our support site for how to find more information about page parameters. You want to add those to your page. And then here is the link to information about, oops, I will have to update this on the version that you get, copy paste fail. But that's going to link to the directory variables so that you get a little more familiarity with the directory variables. And I will let Barbara take it away with the information for next Training Tuesday.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was awesome. Our next Training Tuesday is going to be held on March 31st, 2020. So at that Training Tuesday, we're going to be covering all of our gadgets. We're going to be doing an overview of the gadgets that are available in the system, both for editors and for administrators, give you an idea of what's there and how they can be used. We'll have more details available on the OCN and our support site, so just keep an eye on that. We want to thank everyone for attending today. The recorded presentation materials, PowerPoint slides, all of those pieces of code that Rob copied and pasted into his different XSL and PCF files, we'll have those available for you on our support site. And then as you guys are leaving to go off to your lovely Tuesday, please don't forget to fill out our feedback survey. We love hearing from you and it helps us tailor our Training Tuesdays to what you want to see. So thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.